Welcome to Sisters in Crime Australia and Murder Monday, when authors talk about their crime craft. I'm Karina Kilmore, a crime writer, a journalist, and a volunteer for Sisters in Crime, and we've been celebrating women's crime writing since 1991. Before I introduce Sue Williams, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to all Indigenous people and their elders past, present and emerging. Sue, welcome.
Thanks so much, Karina. Pleasure to be here.
Let me introduce you. You first spoke to Sisters in Crime back in 2013 when your first novel to feature Kaz Tuplin, owner of the Rusty Ball Takeaway, was just released. It had the suitable takeaway-inspired title Murder with the Lot, and it was heartily received. Mystery author Kerry Greenwood called it a well-sourced outback caper with Chico rolls and murder. That was followed by Dead Men Don't Order Flake, which I reckon wins the prize for the best Australian crime novel title ever. You followed up with Live and Let Fry, and now Death at the Belvedere. You have an unusual background, though, for a crime writer, including a PhD in marine biology, and you've also worked as a science writer and chartered accountant. Before we get to the questions, though, can you please give us the elevator pitch for your new novel, Death at the Belvedere, and tell us about that title?
Yeah, sure. So thanks so much, Karina. Death at the Belvedere. It's the fourth book in the Rusty Ball crime series, so it follows on from the titles that you mentioned there. And in this one, we've got, so Cass, as you've said, runs the best and only takeaway shop in Rusty Ball, population 147. And that's sort of located in the Mallee in the northwest of Victoria. And the story starts when Cass's sister Helen arrives in the shop. And Helen is all bones in her Italian weave suit. She is in need of the full comfort, double cheeseburger and extra chips. And it's man trouble as usual, as it always is with Helen. But this time it's less emotional and more fatal because her boyfriend's been pushed off the rooftop apartment of his very swish Fitzroy apartment in Melbourne. And Helen's very busy trying to not become a person of interest. And at the same time, because she had a big argument with him before he came off the balcony, and at the same time, she wants Cass to help her because she wants to retrieve something very rare and valuable from the dead man's apartment. And so this is where Cass comes in, and Cass doesn't want to come in. She is an unlicensed investigator. She does not do this stuff anymore. She has retired from all of this. But of course, it's her sister, and her sister Helen's been getting her into trouble for more than 40 years. So why stop now? But this trouble is going to turn out to be a whole lot bigger than it ever has been with Helen before. So
what a great setup. What a great setup. Thanks very much, Sue. So let's get to the questions. What triggers you to write about a particular crime or story?
Well, for me, it doesn't start so much with a crime or a story per se. It starts with a character who's got a problem of some sort. I think that's because I'm a very nosy person and I like to know about people. And so for me, there's a lot of the enjoyment in writing is about exploring the personality of the character and how they interact with others around them. So because it's crime fiction that I'm writing, obviously there's going to be some kind of crimey problem in the person's life. But yeah, that's how I start. It's with a particular character.
Great, thanks. What research did you do for your latest novel?
Oh, right. Well, research for me, a lot of my research just involves kind of skulking around, trying not to be noticed, and eavesdropping, listening in on conversations. I don't want to sound too sinister there, but yeah, I try not to be noticed. I try to be fairly undercover. For this particular one, though, I did need to, there's kind of medical research story going on in the book. So I needed a bit more information about how medical research works. And luckily, I've got people in my extended family who work in that area, so that was really helpful. I was able to get quite a lot of information that way. I also, because a lot of the stories set in Melbourne rather than the Mallee, that made research a lot easier because I could go to locations that are closer to home. So I did, a bit of investigating around apartments in Fitzroy, because we've got a guy pushed off a rooftop balcony. I didn't push anybody off a rooftop balcony. I just like to point out that there are limits to my research. And quite a bit of research around Parkville and medical research centres and the Docklands as well. So it was kind of like being a tourist in Melbourne, which was interesting.
Lovely. So location was a big research topic. Who should play your central character on screen? Now, we're all very interested in this.
Oh, wow. Yeah, wouldn't that be interesting? Oh, I don't know. I think as a writer, you're better off staying away from that, because I remember hearing Jane Harper talking about that when The Dry got made into a movie, and she said that she writes the books, and the film guys, the film people are the ones who know what will work in film. And I think that's probably a good kind of outlook, because you'd need to keep yourself, I think, quite separate from it. I mean, I was lucky enough that the first book did get optioned for TV. Unfortunately, they never managed to get it made, so the option lapsed. And it was so awful because I couldn't talk about it. You have to sign a confidentiality agreement at the time. So I was so excited but couldn't say anything. And the only time when I could say anything was after the thing had lapsed. But yeah, there were lots of thoughts in my mind at that time about who could potentially play Cass. Yeah. But it really, I think you do need to leave it in the hands of the film guys, and they would decide, I think, who. Wouldn't Essie Davis be lovely? But can you see her running a takeaway shop?
Absolutely. What's your top writing tip, and what's your top self-editing tip?
Right. Top writing tip. I think knowing what works for you without, I don't want to make it a cop out there, but I think each writer is different. And for me, I needed to learn that the pantser approach rather than the plotter approach works for me. The first couple of books I tried to write, I plotted them, and then I found I was just not interested in writing it because I knew what was going to happen. It felt like it was just too known. So for me, learning that pantsing actually worked better for me was helpful, that I wanted to find out the story as I went. So I'd say that that's a good tip, is to know, kind of experiment, find out what works for you. Everybody's different. Self-editing, I think I need to turn off the self-editor in the first draft, because I'm very much a person who is prone to overthinking things and over critiquing things. And if you critique too much early on, you're not going to write anything, because you just become too consumed by self-doubt. So I think try and create a little bit of a bubble of self-belief around yourself for the first draft. It's certainly useful to have some kind of inner critic, but not too strongly, because the inner critic really needs to come out for the second draft and the later drafts, I think.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. How do you write about sex?
Ooh, interesting. There isn't much sex in this particular one, The Death at the Belvedere. There was in the earlier ones. Yeah, that's a really good question, isn't it? How do I approach writing sex? Sort of, I'm not really a kind of too much detail about the sex scene person. So I think I probably write more about the build-up, the attraction, the
anticipation.
Yes, absolutely, the anticipation, and less about the actual getting on with it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love that turn of phrase, getting on with it. What is your writing routine?
I try to do at least 500 words a day when I'm doing a book, writing a book, because I find I have to stay in the story. So I try to write, every day during that period. If I come out of the story and I don't write for a few days or weeks, I find it so hard to get back into it again. So that stopping and starting can be quite hard. It can be difficult to find the time around work and everything to do that, but I found early mornings work for me. So just get your 500 words down early morning, and then you feel like you're set up for the day. And if there's any more words than that, then that's a bonus.
Who are your writing inspirations?
Ooh, well, I guess it would be great if people compared my book with Richard Osman, a British writer who writes sort of light-hearted crime fiction. He wrote The Thursday Murder Club and The Man Who Died Twice, I think it's called, the second book, because I find him quite funny, and he's definitely at that sort of lighter kind of Jane Austen end of crime fiction. So it'd be nice if people made that comparison. I love Vera. I really find the Vera character really interesting. She's a very nuanced character, I think, and the characters around her are interesting.
That's Anne Cleves.
Anne Cleves, yep. And at the moment, I'm really enjoying the audio book of Aoife Clifford's latest book, When We Fall. I find Aoife to be such a good writer, and she's so good at depicting country towns, I think. So, yeah, so those people are probably all quite inspiring.
Yeah, lovely. Oops, we just had that one. How many drafts do you do before handing it in?
Oh, way too many. So there's that first draft where I've got to be in that bubble of self-belief, and then redraft. I tend to redraft as I go, though, so I don't really like to move on to the next chapter if I'm not happy with the previous chapter. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of redrafting as I go, and then probably at least 2 more drafts before I then read it aloud. I think reading aloud can be really helpful before you send it in, because that can help you to identify clunky dialogue or clunky descriptions, or just anything that's sort of not working, long sentences, stuff like that. So yeah, I think that reading aloud's a good tip for me anyway before sending in.
Great. When and how do you work out plot twists and red herrings? This will be interesting since you're a pantser.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's really tough for pantsers to do that. So what I tend to do these days is I tend to write the sort of first 10 to 20,000 words in that pantser way, so that I can explore the characters and find out what it is that I'm actually trying to do. And these days I actually use a book that my writing partner Nikki Reed suggested. It's a really good book. It's called Save the Cat, and I can't remember the author. It's a book about structuring screenplays, but it's also appropriate for novels, I think. And it talks about beats and how you, at certain points in the story, you need to be hitting a certain development. So it might be something like in the middle of the book, you might tend to have a sort of midpoint. He calls it bad guys close in. Now, that works in crime fiction, but I think he said it could be in other kinds of fiction, it could work too. So, it could be an inner demon or something like that moving in. So I find now that I do need to definitely know by the middle of the book who is the murderer, because I need him to start closing in and doing stuff, even if it's just in the background and Cass can't see it. Yeah, so I found that to be, I would recommend that book really highly. Great. Actually, Save the Cat. Yep.
Save the Cat, great. How much of you is in your characters?
Oh, probably in all of them, even the murderer, there's a little bit of me, because I think I have to sort of relate to the characters as I'm writing them. I have to be able to sort of hear them and see them and believe in them. I heard Graham Simpson, the author of the Rosie Project and various other books, give a really good answer to this once, and I would agree with him. He said that he thinks that his characters are a third someone he knows, a third himself, and a third just completely made up. And I think that's probably not a bad kind of description.
Yeah. Tell us something not in your book about your main character.
Oh, well, I can tell you about Cass's son, Dean, who's not the main character, but he's pretty major. He's the police officer, the 6'1" of rules and regulations, oozing disapproval. He, I was booked for jaywalking once in Melbourne City, just crossing a perfectly safe laneway, Karina, no traffic. I know it was a red light, but it was perfectly safe, and I was late for work. And this officious policeman on the other side, quite young guy, came up to me with a clipboard and fined me $60 for jaywalking and gave me a whole big lecture about, you know, safety, blah, blah, blah. I don't know, have you got police officers in your family? I don't mean to be disrespectful. No. Anyway, I thought, you, sir, you're going in my fiction. So Dean's a bit inspired by him.
Fantastic. What's the hardest part about writing a novel?
I think just, well, apart from the backache, because you're at a computer for endless hours, just the marathon nature of it. You know, like writing can be, I don't mean this to sound like a whole lot of complaining about writing, but writing can be hard because, you know, you've got to turn off that self-doubt and stop telling yourself that it's all rubbish and a waste of time, and stop telling yourself it's an indulgence and you should go and do something else, you know, deal with all the other issues in your life. So you've got all of that, but then when you're writing a novel, you've got the marathon nature of it as well, because it's such a big thing, a big piece of writing to do, and you've got to keep at it and keep going through such a long period of time. And I have found structure to be quite difficult, so that Save the Cat books helped me a lot with structure. That's where I would often fall down in the early days. Yeah, there's a lot of things that are hard about writing. Well, it's difficult to choose just one.
Why is crime such an appealing genre?
Yeah, well, I mean, who of us doesn't like crime? I mean, we're talking to the converted here, aren't we? Because you and I, surely we love crime, and surely our viewers love crime. So, but I think it's the life and death nature of it, high stakes, pacey, you know, compulsive page turning nature of it. So you're really hooked into the story and you forget whatever else is going on in your life while you're in the story, if it's a good story. And just often, you know, the character development too. I think I've heard Emma Viskick say this, that she thinks that it's such a great way to explore the human nature.
Yeah.
Because, you know, so much goes on in crime fiction.
And our last question for today, how would you get away with murder?
Am I allowed to have a time machine?
If you want. Yeah.
I think I would like to go back to a pre-forensics time. I think when you look at the horrible, you know, experience of Lindy Chamberlain, you know, if you go back to a time like that, pre-forensics, so that people can't easily do any DNA analysis or anything like that, that would certainly be on my side. And also, if I'm in a time machine, I'm going to have an alibi, aren't I? Because I've gone back in time. I'm still in the present day. I've got a way to get away. As long as I don't change the time-space continuum and I end up not being born or something. So that
oh my goodness. Well, you definitely get away with it then. Sue Williams, thank you for joining us on Murder Monday today.
Thanks so much, Karina. Great to chat.